Take it away.
Okay, is this working?
Yes.
It is? Okay, great. We're trying to figure out this microphone thing, and Teresa actually saved me by pointing out the on button. So not only is she putting this whole conference on, she's also a tech wizard. Thank you, Teresa. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Catherine Glenn Foster. I'm President and CEO of Americans United for Life. We are the legal architects of the pro-life movement. We were formed in 1971 to work towards a world where everyone is welcomed in life and protected in law from conception to natural death. So today I'd like to share with you about, hang on, okay, there we go, bringing life to the Golden State. Today I'd like to share with you about federal and state laws in progress here in the United States, the real-world impact of those laws, and what you all can do to further the groundswell of progress that we are seeing on life issues state by state right here in California. So in my work, alongside legislators from coast to coast, and I was born in Georgia. I've been in D.C. for about 15 years now, but I have to say, West Coast, Best Coast, love it, yeah. But I see a lot of states. And so a few months ago, I finally went and I picked up my copy of the National Parks passport. I got the collector's edition. It's actually really cool. You get like stickers you put in and stamps and everywhere you go. And it looks like that. Oh, there are a lot of national sites around here, including just a few miles away from here. And one of them is one of the few national park sites that honors an author. There are not a lot of those. There's a lot of ground they have to cover, but a few honor authors. The one here is honoring Eugene O'Neill. And his historic site is just a few minutes away. He was called the dark genius of American theater, themes of life and death and mourning. One of his biographies actually said, while America in the 1920s danced, drank, and prospered, O'Neill became famous for dark, serious, tragic plays that ran against the grain. In spite of all this, O'Neill's plays were sometimes immensely popular with more ordinary audiences and readers. And then in 1930, when Sinclair Lewis won the Nobel Prize, he responded that it should have been given to O'Neill instead because he had done nothing much in American drama save to transform it utterly from a false world of neat and competent trickery to a world of splendor and fear and greatness. So 6 years later, there were a few Pulitzers along the way, and O'Neill did in fact win the Nobel. He's the only American dramatist to have won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but through it all, he recognized, and this is critical here, he recognized the inherent value of life. And a quote from one of his plays is, "Man is born broken, he lives by mending," and he adds, "The grace of God is glue." That mending puts me in mind of another, there are again not many authors, but it puts me in mind of another one of those National Historic Sites authors, and it's Carl Sandburg. His home is about 15 minutes from my grandmother's house in North Carolina. One of his best-known poems you may have heard of, Fog, written in Chicago, but I think it could have been easily San Francisco. It was that fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city and on silent haunches and then moves on. But tying in that idea of working and of mending, Carl Sandburg also said, "Only fighters today will save the world." And that brings us to life. It's a fight we've had for nearly 50 years. Pardon me, I am not used to these little clicky things. So we're several slides behind here. Okay, there we have O'Neill. I'm not kidding, several. There we have O'Neill. Okay, so I love this picture here. It was pretty rare, but it's one of the few of him smiling. Everything else, not smiling at all. Next, Carl Sandburg. He's one of my favorites. There's the San Francisco fog. Okay. Back on track. Okay, so we've had this fight for life nearly 50 years. Back in 1973, we had seen this dramatic shift in the law since 1900. Back then, abortion was a felony in nearly every state. There were marches, there were demonstrations with some people defending life and others wasn't there, claiming a right to abortion. By 1973, a number of states had legalized abortion, at least in some circumstances, but the majority of U.S. states still banned the procedure. Then the U.S. Supreme Court, 7 of 9 justices, legalized abortion nationwide for all 9 months for any reason. Many people said that we pro-life advocates should leave the law alone. The court decided that's the law and that's just the way it is. You lost, go home. But that is not the way people felt in 1973. They were not ready to give up their heroic defense of the defenseless. And that is not the way people feel today. In fact, we are seeing powerful pro-life themes in our culture today, even in the animated superhero movie Incredibles 1. I talk a lot about the pro-life themes in Incredibles 1 and 2. They are so good and they are so pro-life. But there's a character named Mirage, and she's the right-hand woman of the supervillain until she reforms and begins to help the Incredibles. So what inspires her reformation? She is repulsed by the supervillain's disregard for human life, and especially for innocent human life. She says valuing life is not weakness, and disregarding it is not strength. So in 1973, political leaders, community leaders, lawyers, doctors, ordinary people got together and began to work to restore the culture, to restore the law. And people got involved in this epic battle for life for so many different reasons. Some of them were deeply committed to life as a moral, as a human rights issue, and every fiber of their being just called on them to defend life. Some were birth mothers or fathers and may place their child in a loving family through adoption. Some chose life and parenting in the midst of an unexpected pregnancy or a hard time. Some saw potentially life-changing decisions, abortion, adoption, assisted suicide, parenting, play out in their families and with their friends. Some were employees or volunteers in the industry and then saw the light and got out, began to speak out. And some of them, maybe here, maybe in this fight, because they or their partners may have had an abortion. I know, I've been there. But no matter how people find their way here, we are here for a cause that is just, that is right, that is the most fundamental right, because if we don't have the right to life, how do we exercise any of our other rights? We are here for a cause that takes all of us. No matter what someone's calling is within the field of life advocacy, whether it's medicine or pregnancy care or politics, law, media, social media, street activism, resources, prayer, support, every single one of those callings, every single person is uniquely important, uniquely personal, and uniquely even intimate as we make connections that build bridges, that save lives, as we are working with others to protect women and save preborn children. So in 1973, people began taking action. They began educating themselves, talking to their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, sharing the facts about abortion. And I would add that that is still so important today. Most people still believe that statistic, that only 3% of Planned Parenthood's services are abortion, and that statistic that 1 in 3 women has had an abortion. Most people don't know that America is one of the world's 4 most radical nations when it comes to abortion law. It's us, Canada, China, North Korea. And millennials, recent studies have shown millennials tend to think that Roe v. Wade happened right after the American Revolution. 57% of millennials don't even know that Roe v. Wade relates to abortion at all. So when you see that polling where people are being asked, well, would you like to overturn Roe v. Wade? Well, people don't know what they're answering, and we have a lot of educating to do. But the more people learn the facts about abortion and abortion law, the more that they favor life-affirming law and policy. So 1973 all the way through today, people began attending and leading rallies and marches, establishing pro-life educational and healthcare alternatives when so much of the mainstream seemed to be promoting abortion. And that has led to this vast network that we have now of more than 2,500 pregnancy resource centers, outnumbering abortion clinics more than 5 to 1, and offering a broad range of services, from practical counseling and training to concrete resources like formula and diapers and baby clothes. And in 1973, people also began to work through the law to enable life and empower women, to save lives and protect women's health. Why? Number 1, to shape and build a culture of life. Number 2, to save lives now. It's been estimated that the Hyde Amendment alone has saved more than 2 million lives. 3, to lay the groundwork for overturning Roe, passing laws that can lead to that test case that will allow the Supreme Court to overturn Roe and return the life issue to the states, where, based on our successes in the state legislatures, we are confident that we can make real progress in state protections for human life. And 4, legislation to lay the groundwork once Roe is overturned and the life issue does return to the states. Our goals include increasing legal protections for mothers and children, spotlighting substandard abortion facility conditions, educating legislators, judges, and the public on the risks of abortion and the public health vacuum that we have here today. Challenging the reliance interest, that Supreme Court's mistaken notion that women rely on abortion to succeed, that women cannot order our education, our careers, our families, our future without access to legal abortion. That was an idea that the Supreme Court came up with in 1992 to uphold Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision. So 92 was the Casey decision, and they said, well, even though Roe is on maybe shaky footing, even though scholars on both the left and the right recognize that Roe was poorly reasoned, wrongly decided, that it's unconstitutional, or it's not moored in the Constitution, nonetheless, we need to uphold those core principles, because if we don't, women will not know what to do. And yet, we have seen again that polling is showing that Americans increasingly recognize that when it comes to passing life-affirming laws, we don't have to choose between mothers and their children, that we can pass laws that advance the interests of both, because abortion does harm both, and we don't have to choose. But with that said, when we're working to pass pro-life laws and advance the cause of life, sometimes in some venues have been easier than others. We know how hard it can be at the federal level. It seems like things often move slowly or not at all. And at the Supreme Court, they've had chance after chance to overturn Roe, and so far have declined. So from Roe in 1973 to Casey in 1992, Hellerstedt in 2016, and all of the cases in between, we had a years-long struggle to get a federal ban on partial birth abortion in the United States. It was a big win, but it took so long. Our struggle for years now to stop using taxpayer dollars to fund elective abortions and to enact protections for unborn children who can feel pain. It can be discouraging, but we are making progress, even on the federal level. Last year, the Mexico City policy, which withholds funding from foreign and international organizations that perform or lobby for abortions, that was reinstated and even expanded. We ended funding of the United Nations Population Fund due to its complicity with China's forced abortion and sterilization policies. That redirected millions in foreign aid to other family planning and healthcare programs. Defunding opportunities, those are increasing as well, and the efforts there are continuing at both the federal and at the state levels. And at the Supreme Court, as you know, we just had a big win for the pro-life movement in the NIFLA case, fighting back against a law right here in California that was forcing pregnancy centers to advertise for abortions on their very own walls. An absolutely appalling idea, and one that the Supreme Court fortunately did push back on. Yeah. Yeah, very, very exciting. But even with all of that at the federal level, and we are making progress, we're seeing real advances there, we are nonetheless seeing a lot more success in the states. We have pro-life elected officials there, we have supermajorities in many states, and it makes sense, when you look at the states and you see how much closer the elected officials there are to their constituencies, and how they're right there, they're talking with them day in and day out. It's been a long time coming. In the first year since Roe v. Wade voided nearly every law on abortion in America, states began to try to enact common sense abortion regulations to push back on that abortion extremism that the Supreme Court had foisted upon us. In the first 5 years, states adopted 203 restrictions, primarily health and safety standards, parental involvement, gestational limits, and critical conscience rights. Pretty soon, the battle turned to abortion funding, and if taxpayers could be forced to fund elective abortions. In the first 10 years after Roe, so from 73 to 82, states averaged 38 pro-life bills signed into law every year, and that was a success. That was very, very good. Over the next 28 years, we saw a slowdown. From 83 to 2010, the states passed 406 pro-life laws, an average of 14 every year. They were all good and important laws. They focused on things like giving women the time that they need to make such a decision, partial birth abortion limits. There was one really tough year where we only got 3 pro-life bills passed into law. And every time we thought we had a chance at overturning Roe, we were disappointed yet again. But then we had 2010. We had those midterm elections, and we were able to send proudly pro-life elected officials to state capitals across the country. Since January 2011, the states have passed close to 500 pro-life bills, an average of more than 60, about 60 every year, and well over a third of all of the pro-life bills passed since Roe. These are victories like full informed consent for women and girls considering abortion, parental involvement, chemical abortion limits, taxpayer funding restrictions, and gestational limits. At this point, well over half the states in the U.S. are considered by the abortion industry to be pro-life. That's not exactly the term they use. They actually call it hostile or extremely hostile to abortion. But it means the same thing. So we're very excited about that. And we are making real progress in the states and having a profound impact. Just to share with you a few highlights. We are seeing progress on limits after abortion after 20 weeks, parental involvement, taxpayer funding limitations, informed consent, rights of conscience, abortion practice being limited to physicians only, fetal homicide laws, wrongful death lawsuits being enabled, and ultrasound requirements. In the last legislative session, the 2017 state legislative session, 19 states passed nearly 70 pro-life bills, with 63 relating specifically to abortion, including full informed consent for women, ending dangerous and painful late-term abortions, defunding the abortion industry. Wyoming is probably my favorite from 2017. After they had their own 28-year drought, so we had the 28-year slowdown at the on the national level, where we saw 14 pro-life bills on average passed every year. Wyoming had its own 28-year drought with 0 pro-life bills passed for 28 years, and then in 2017 they decided that the one that was so important that they would advance that and break that drought was an ultrasound requirement, so that if a woman is in an abortion facility and if she asks to see the ultrasound, if the facility is performing an ultrasound, they have to let her see it. And because of my experience, and because I was told that I was not allowed to see my child's photo, I love that women in Wyoming now are able to have that right. They now are able to see their child's photo if they choose to do that. So Wyoming, very exciting last session. And even this year, we have already seen dozens more pro-life bills passed into law already. Informed consent, pain-capable 20-week and special needs targeting limits, abortion reporting, defunding, and so much more. Now, it is not all good news. We now have legalized assisted suicide in 7 U.S. jurisdictions, and sadly, one of them is right here in California. The Assisted Suicide Lobby, which is led by Compassion and Choices, formerly known as the Hemlock Society, until they deemed that name a bit too bleak. And then Death with Dignity is the other major organization there. They are pushing hard. They've got the money to do it. They're producing documentaries. They're producing movies. There was even a comedy about assisted suicide. I collect these movies. I haven't brought myself to watch that one yet. It's called Youth in Oregon. They're introducing about 24 bills every year to legalize it as part of this campaign to indoctrinate us and get us used to the idea over a period of years until it becomes something that we give in. It becomes a bargaining chip in politics. But even there, we have good news. In the more than 20 years since assisted suicide was legalized in Oregon, only 6 U.S. jurisdictions have decided that assisted suicide is worth the risk. In that same period of time, 10 states have moved to affirmatively ban assisted suicide, joining their sister states in saying, no, this is something that we are going to affirmatively say is a bad idea. One recent one, D.C., right where I work, there are 11,000 doctors who are licensed to practice medicine in D.C., In order to then prescribe assisted suicide drugs in DC, you have to put your name on a list, on a registry that says, not only am I a doctor, I also want to be this kind of doctor and do this kind of thing. What's interesting is only 2 doctors have actually signed up for that. And in the time since assisted suicide was legalized, more than a year now since it's been a viable law, a grand total of 0 patients have signed up for it. So, yeah. And having worked closely with the minority communities in DC on this and the lead up to it, this is not something that they were asking for. So even though this is the first majority-minority jurisdiction to legalize assisted suicide, there has been strong pushback from a broad variety of communities, and it's been very heartening to see. So, so a lot of good news even there, but it is something that we must continue to fight back on. It is an emerging battle. And then other fights that we're having. Last year, states passed 12 new laws trying to expand abortion in America. So even as we're pushing back, even as we're passing our 60-plus pro-life laws every single year and making progress and advancing life in the states, the abortion industry is pushing back as well. And so we had the 12 laws last year, and every year we see just more attempts to introduce bills, to pass laws that would open the door wide open to abortion, enshrining abortion in state constitutions, opening the door to abortion funding, everything along those lines. Right here in California, it's tough. Good news, so every year Americans United for Life puts out a life list. We go through all of the laws relating to abortion and life issues and bioethics in every single state, and we rank the states with an algorithm. It's very complicated, but we rank the states every year. And good news, California's not last. So there is that. But we have, with that said, lost on some really bad bills this year. Defunding limitations, characterizing life-affirming law as being dangerous to women, asserting a right to abortion, and if I can say it, standing for Planned Parenthood, and of course the terrible bill to require each public university student health center to distribute abortion drugs, which is an assault to conscience and also to women's health, with the medical data that demonstrates the risks of chemical abortion, even over surgical abortion. A very, very dangerous idea. We discussed the tragedy of assisted suicide in California. There was actually a good bill that was introduced this year. It would have related to assisted suicide reporting requirements, making sure that that doctors who were prescribing these drugs would track their specialties, that the reasoning why people may have been requesting this would be tracked, that it would be taken down, whether the person requesting it might be interested in or might have pursued any kind of counseling. Just some really basic tracking things, gathering basic data, but the session adjourned before it could advance. So even a basic bill like that, we've seen basic common sense bills like that fail up and down the West Coast, and that again it's discouraging, it's troubling. So we have to be ever vigilant. We have to fight back against the bad, even as we promote the good. But again, good news, just a few weeks ago, the pro-choice organization, NARAL Pro-Choice America, they sent out an email, and the subject line was, "Not a drill, Roe v. Wade in danger." But wait, get this. This is before Justice Kennedy announced he was retiring. Yeah, so it is only more so since then. So we are seeing, that the abortion industry is concerned. Just look at the response to Justice Kennedy and Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation when we have celebrities dressing up as Handmaid's Tale people and wearing sandwich boards and the whole thing in Oregon with NARAL and the ice cream and Rocky Roe v. Wade. I still can't believe that was a legitimate news story. Everyone heard about that, right? Yeah, okay. If not, look it up. They partnered with NARAL and made an ice cream flavor, and the real travesty, it was actually 4 flavors. So Rocky Roe v. Wade, there were 3 other flavors, and one of them was brown butter almond brittle. That's something I would have gone out of my way for. Anyway, okay, so, I mean, you sounded really good. So why all these laws? We are having a real impact, and a lot of it is due to laws. There are so many factors that go as part of that, and we went through so many of the different fields and specialties of pro-life work, whether it's medical or legal or political or social media or whatever it is. But the law, I did it again, I'm sorry. I'm not used to this hand thing, and I keep gesturing. There's the California part. I like the bear. Okay, so impacting the culture. So as we are impacting the culture, we are seeing increasingly that public opinion, thank you, is on our side. And the latest Gallup poll numbers on abortion are very, very encouraging for the pro-life community. And they show that the percentage of Americans who self-identify as being pro-life has skyrocketed by 15% since the mid-90s. So now it's 48%. The percentage of Americans who self-identify as being pro-choice has dropped by 8% since the mid-90s, so 48%. And you're thinking, okay, that's tied. Then take a step back. If you just take away or remove those more politically loaded terms, pro-life, pro-choice, then the true difference in beliefs starts to reveal itself. 48% of Americans believing that abortion is morally wrong, and only 43% believing that abortion might be morally acceptable. Okay, take a step farther back again. When you look at the polls, 53% of Americans, a majority, believe that abortion should be legal in either no or very, very limited circumstances. Well, guess what? That requires overturning Roe. Remember, we're one of the foremost radical nations in the world. And that shows us that Americans believe that that abortion is wrong. Americans believe that that we do need rollbacks. It's 3/4 of Americans who want a major rollback on abortion to at least the end of the first trimester, if not even further. But that's 3/4 of Americans. And the more Americans learn about abortion and get to the facts of the issue instead of just the politically loaded terms, the rhetoric that surrounds it, the more life-affirming their positions become. The majority of Americans reject Roe. They want those rollbacks. They want to stop funding elective abortions with our taxpayer dollars. And as it turns out, abortion is not the divisive issue that we've been told that it is. With 53% of Americans radically pro-abortion and 53% solidly pro-life, most Americans do want rollbacks and want restrictions. So we're not talking about 50% of Americans being radically pro-abortion. Then when it comes to events, the March for Life is going strong, with marchers far outnumbering protesters. And you always see that handful of protesters at the end in front of the Supreme Court with their signs, and they're often vulgar and sometimes biologically questionable. But even back in 2010, we saw the president of NARAL get off the train at Union Station, a few blocks from the Supreme Court, and it's March for Life Day. And she gets off the train and she's surrounded with this ocean of pro-life young people. And her quote was, "I just thought, my gosh, they are so young. There are so many of them and they are so young." And then in 2017, March for Life, when both the New York Times and the Washington Post featured page A1 above the fold big photos of the March for Life right on their cover page. And in those photos, they could not hide the youth and the passion in those images. But most critically, all these pro-life laws that we are passing are resulting in real-world lives saved. Abortions in America are now at their lowest rate since 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade, down nearly 50% since 2006. And the CDC cites state-based pro-life laws as one reason for that drop. Relatedly, we're seeing abortion clinics closing by the hundreds, and the Guttmacher Institute, which was founded as the research arm of Planned Parenthood, they report that the number of abortion facilities declined 6% between 2011 and 14, from 839 to 788, and that 90% of U.S. counties have no abortion facility at all. So we are winning for life in America. And this work takes place not only in the courtrooms, but in the state houses and on the streets. And both of those are places, all of those are places where we need your voices and where our leaders need your voices. We talked about all the different ways to fight for life and the different venues, all the different specialties. All of you can help win for life, both there and specifically for pro-life laws. How? contacting your elected representatives, getting to know them, meet them, talk with them, staying informed on events and legislation relating to abortion and the positions and statements of your elected officials, following your leaders on social media, contacting them via Twitter, phone, and email, attending hearings, testifying at hearings, running for office, going to rallies and events, engaging in sidewalk advocacy. Make your voice heard on the sidewalk, whether it's in front of a Capitol or wherever it is, make your voice heard. Go to state Capitol lobby days, sign petitions, even getting involved with school boards. This fight starts young. But as I look out at all of you, I have such hope for California. You are the team doing the mending. You are the team that is fighting for life and saving the world. We are proud to stand alongside you and to work with you. Would be happy to do anything that we can as you work to educate your communities, as you educate your legislators, your neighbors, and as you're advocating for life. We are changing the culture and changing the laws one at a time, pushing back on the bad bills, even as we fight for the good ones, starting to, slowly advance life-affirming laws, even here in California. There is hope. We're seeing pushback from the Supreme Court. We're seeing pushback from the people. And that is what the lawmakers look towards. It's time to bring life back to the Golden State. And it is all of you who are doing it. So thank you. I'm just honored to be here with you today. Thank you. Normally I'm better with these things.